Welcome back, coin collectors and history lovers. Today we're diving into the world of the top 6 most valuable U.S. 1-cent coins. Tiny in size but huge in value. Whether you're just starting your collection or hoping to strike copper gold, these are the pennies you want to keep an eye out for. First up, the 1970 D penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is indicated by the small D mint mark just below the year on the coin's obverse. This penny is part of the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, which ran from 1959 to 2008. The obverse of the coin features the familiar bust of President Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner, a design first used in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of Lincoln's birth. The reverse shows the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo, which replaced the original wheat ears design. The 1970 D penny was minted in large quantities. Over 2.8 billion coins were produced. It was struck using a composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc, which was standard for U.S. pennies until 1982. Because of this high mintage, most 1970 D pennies are extremely common and hold very little value beyond their face value, especially if they are circulated and show wear. However, there are some important details and rare varieties that collectors pay attention to. While the Denver Mint didn't produce any major double-die obverse or reverse varieties in 1970, a small number of high-grade, uncirculated examples, and coins with strong strikes or full steps on the Lincoln Memorial can carry a premium in the collector market. Additionally, coins with unique errors such as off-center strikes, die cracks, or clipped planchets can be worth significantly more depending on the severity and visibility of the error. In terms of value, a regular circulated 1970 D penny is usually only worth its copper melt value, which is just over 1 cent. But in mint state condition, especially at grades MS65 and above, its value can range from $5 to $20 or more depending on the quality and eye appeal. Coins that are graded MS67 red by PCGS or NGC, meaning they are in pristine condition and have retained their original red luster, can sell for over $200 at auction simply because they are much rarer in that condition. It's important to note that collectors also seek out special proof coins from 1970, especially those minted in San Francisco, such as the 1970S small date proof penny. But the 1970 D is a business strike coin, and while it does not have the same level of rarity or controversy as some of the San Francisco issues, it still holds historical significance as part of the broader story of Lincoln cents. The year 1970 itself was an important time in American history, marked by the Vietnam War, the Apollo 13 space mission, and a rapidly changing social and political landscape. The coins from this era reflect a United States in transition, and for many collectors, owning coins from the 1970s is a way of preserving a small but tangible piece of that history. So, if you come across a 1970 D penny, it's probably not a rare treasure, but don't dismiss it too quickly. Check for unusual errors or high-grade condition, and always handle your coins carefully, especially if you think they might be uncirculated or special. Even a common penny can tell an uncommon story. Next up, the 1975 penny features the familiar bust of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, a design that was first introduced in 1909 to commemorate Lincoln's 100th birthday. This iconic image, designed by Victor David Brenner, has become one of the longest-running designs in U.S. coinage history. On the reverse of the coin is the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo, which replaced the wheat ears design starting in 1959. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny image of the statue of Lincoln between the columns of the memorial. In 1975, the U.S. Mint produced these coins in enormous numbers. Over 5.4 billion were struck in Philadelphia, and more than 4.5 billion were made at the Denver Mint. That means more than 10 billion 1975 pennies were put into circulation, which makes them incredibly common, especially in circulated or poor condition. Now let's talk about the composition. The 1975 Lincoln cent was made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This copper content actually makes these pennies more valuable than their face value in terms of melt value alone. However, due to U.S. laws that prohibit the melting down of pennies for their metal, this doesn't translate into real profit unless laws change in the future. When it comes to value, a 1975 1-cent coin in bad condition, that is, a coin that has been heavily circulated, shows major signs of wear, or has environmental damage, is usually worth just 1 cent. Collectors are rarely interested in heavily worn examples because they are so widely available. Even though the copper content gives it a theoretical value of around 2 cents in melt terms, you can't legally melt pennies for profit. So unless the coin has a special variety, mint error, or extremely high-grade preservation, the value remains at face value. However, there are exceptions. Certain errors, like off-center strikes, die cracks, double dies, or clipped planchets, can make even a worn 1975 penny worth more than 1 cent. These error coins are rare and must be authenticated by experts or grading services to confirm their legitimacy and value. Still, it's important to note that such errors are not the norm, and most 1975 pennies in poor condition will not have these features. The historical context of 1975 is also worth mentioning. This was a time of transition and uncertainty in the United States. The country was recovering from the aftermath of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal, and the economy was facing inflation and rising commodity prices, including copper. Because of these economic conditions, the U.S. Mint was already considering changes to the composition of the penny, which eventually occurred in 1982 when they switched to copper-plated zinc to reduce costs. So, what does this all mean for someone holding a 1975 penny in bad condition? Realistically, it means you're holding on to a small piece of American history with minimal monetary value, but some sentimental or educational worth. These coins are great for beginner collectors who are learning to identify mint marks, observe coin wear, or explore U.S. history through coinage. And while they won't make you rich, they can still be fun to collect, trade, or study. In conclusion, a 1975 United States 1-cent coin in bad condition typically holds only its face value, unless it happens to be a rare error variety. But its value as a historical artifact and educational tool still matters, especially to those passionate about numismatics. Keep searching, keep learning, and who knows? You just might come across a hidden gem in your next handful of change. Next, let's begin with the design. On the obverse, or front side of the coin, we have the iconic image of President Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. This design was first introduced in 1909 to celebrate the centennial of Lincoln's birth, and it has remained on the penny ever since, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. Above Lincoln's head is the inscription, "In God We Trust," with liberty to his left and the date, 1973, to his right. If your coin has a small D below the date, that means it was minted in Denver. If there's no mint mark, it was struck in Philadelphia. Turning the coin over, the reverse features the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 and created by Frank Gasparro. What's special about this design is that if you look closely between the columns of the memorial, you can see a tiny image of the seated Lincoln statue, just like the one in the real monument in Washington, D.C. Above the memorial is the inscription, United States of America, and below it are the words 1 cent, with the motto E pluribus unum, sitting just above the memorial. Now let's talk about the coin's composition. The 1973 Lincoln cent is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This was the standard metal composition for U.S. pennies at the time, giving them a weight of 3.11 grams. It's worth noting that this composition would change a few years later in 1982, when the U.S. Mint switched to a copper-plated zinc planchet to reduce costs. So the 1973 penny still has that classic heavy copper feel, which many collectors prefer. In terms of mintage, the numbers were quite high. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 3.7 billion pennies in 1973, while the Denver Mint added over 3.5 billion more. Additionally, the San Francisco Mint produced about 319 million proof coins that year, which were sold directly to collectors and not intended for circulation. So all in all, the 1973 penny is not rare. There are billions in existence, but condition and special characteristics can affect its value. So what is a 1973 Lincoln cent worth today if it's in fine condition? First, let's define what fine condition means. In numismatic terms, a coin graded as fine, F12, will show moderate to considerable wear, but the major details of the design will still be visible. Lincoln's facial features will be worn but recognizable, and the lettering will still be legible. It's a step above good and very good, but well below mint state or uncirculated grades. Because of the high mintage and the fact that millions of these coins are still in circulation, a 1973 penny in fine condition typically holds only a modest value. In most cases, it's worth about 2 to 3 cents, just slightly more than its face value. This slight premium is mainly due to its copper content, since the melt value of a pre-1982 penny is currently about 2 cents. However, it's important to know that melting pennies for their copper is illegal under U.S. law, so that theoretical value doesn't translate into real-world profit. That being said, there are still reasons to pay attention to your 1973 penny. If the coin has a strong strike, full details, or an unusual error such as a double die, off-center strike, die cracks, or a clipped planchet, it could be worth much more. Rare errors or high-grade examples graded MS-65 red or better can sell for several dollars, and even over $100 in top condition, especially if professionally graded by PCGS or NGC. Next up, the 1974 United States 1-cent coin, commonly known as the Lincoln penny, is a small yet significant piece of American numismatic history. Struck by the U.S. Mint in massive numbers, this coin continues to capture the interest of collectors due to its unique historical background, variations in minting, and its experimental versions that were never officially released. The obverse of the 1974 penny features a portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, designed by Victor David Brenner. This design has been in use since 1909, celebrating the centennial of Lincoln's birth. The portrait shows Lincoln facing right, with the words, "In God We Trust," inscribed above his head, "Liberty" to the left of the image, and the date 1974 to the right. Some coins also include a mint mark beneath the date, either a D for Denver or an S for San Francisco, while those from Philadelphia carry no mint mark at all. The reverse side of the coin showcases the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Designed by Frank Gasparo, the reverse includes fine details such as the tiny representation of the statue of Lincoln visible between the columns. The inscriptions on this side read, "United States of America" at the top, "A pluribus unum" above, the memorial, and 1 cent at the bottom. This reverse design remained in use until 2008 and is instantly recognizable to millions of Americans. In 1974, the standard composition of the penny was 95% copper and 5% zinc, giving the coin a total weight of 3.11 grams. However, due to the rising cost of copper during the early 1970s, the United States Mint began experimenting with alternative materials for the cent. This led to the production of over 1 million test coins made from aluminum. These 1974 aluminum cents were produced primarily for testing and evaluation purposes and were never officially released for circulation. Most of them were recalled and destroyed, but a few specimens were not returned and still exist in private hands. These rare examples are considered illegal to own and are subject to seizure by the U.S. government, but their estimated value today can range from several $100,000 to over $1 million if ever sold at auction. In terms of official mintage, the 1974 penny was produced in enormous numbers. The Philadelphia Mint struck more than 4.2 billion coins without a mint mark, while the Denver Mint produced over 4.1 billion with a D mint mark. The San Francisco Mint added over 412 million coins, primarily proof issues with the S mint mark. This massive production makes the 1974 penny one of the most common coins of the Lincoln Memorial series, which is why it typically holds very little premium in circulated condition. However, coins in uncirculated or high-grade condition can be more desirable to collectors. When it comes to value, most circulated 1974 pennies are worth only their face value of 1 cent. However, because of their copper content, the melt value is often higher, around 2 to 3 cents, although it remains illegal to melt pennies for metal scrap value. Uncirculated examples, especially those graded MS65 or higher, can fetch between 25 cents and a few dollars depending on luster, strike, and overall quality. Proof coins from San Francisco, particularly those in pristine condition, are more valuable, often ranging from $1 to $10 or more, depending on the grade and visual appeal. Next up, the 1964 United States 1-cent coin, commonly referred to as the Lincoln penny, holds a special place in American coinage history. Though it is a widely circulated and commonly found coin, the 1964 penny is more than just spare change. It represents the end of an era, a time of transition in U.S. coin production, and carries historical significance that collectors and enthusiasts alike continue to appreciate today. On the obverse, or front, of the 1964 penny is the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln facing right. This image was designed by Victor David Brenner and was first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The design features the words, "In God We Trust," above Lincoln's head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1964 to the right. Depending on the mint, the coin may have a small D mint mark below the date, indicating it was struck at the Denver Mint. If there is no mint mark, the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. Chapter. The reverse side of the coin is the classic wheat ears design, also by Victor David Brenner. This design features two stylized wheat stalks curving along the left and right edges, framing the inscriptions 1 cent and United States of America in the center. Above that is the Latin motto E pluribus unum, which means out of many one. The wheat reverse design was used from 1909 until 1958, but due to massive production and coin die usage in the early 1960s, many coins struck in 1964 still bear this design as leftovers from previous year's dies and minting practices. The 1964 Lincoln cent was struck using a composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc, a standard metal alloy for pennies that had been used since 1864. The coin weighs 3.11 grams and has a diameter of 19 millimeters. The large mintage of 1964 pennies marked the final year that U.S. coinage would use high amounts of copper before the copper crisis of the 1970s began pushing the U.S. Mint toward alternative materials. In 1964, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 2.6 billion 1-cent coins, while the Denver Mint added more than 3.8 billion, making a combined total of over 6.4 billion pennies produced that year. This enormous mintage was largely a response to a coin shortage in the early 1960s, leading to massive production to meet national demand. Because of this high volume, most 1964 pennies are extremely common in circulation, and finding one in pocket change today is still relatively easy. In terms of value, most 1964 pennies in circulated condition are worth only their face value of 1 cent. However, due to their high copper content, they have an intrinsic melt value that can range from 2 to 3 cents, though it is illegal to melt U.S. pennies. For metal resale, uncirculated or mint state coins can fetch a higher price. A 1964 penny graded MS-60 to MS-63 might sell for around 15 to 50 cents, while higher grade examples, such as those in MS-65 red condition, can sell for $1 to $5 or more. Full red coins, which have retained their original mint luster without turning brown from oxidation, are the most valuable among uncirculated specimens. There are also known varieties and errors for the 1964 penny that increase its value. Collectors look for examples with double die obverses, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, die cracks, and other striking anomalies. These error coins can be worth anywhere from a few dollars to over $100 depending on the severity and rarity of the error. One notable variety includes the 1964 D repunched mint mark, where the D appears stamped more than once due to a die alignment error. These coins are popular among variety collectors. Next up, the 1977 United States 1-cent coin, more commonly known as the Lincoln penny, is a familiar piece of American currency that remains in circulation to this day. While it may not stand out as rare or particularly valuable in most cases, especially in no fine or heavily circulated condition, it still holds historical and collectible interest for coin enthusiasts. This penny features the iconic image of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, or front, of the coin. The design was created by Victor David Brenner and has been in continuous use since 1909, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. On the obverse, Lincoln faces right with the motto, "In God We Trust," above his head, Liberty to the left, and the year 1977 to the right. Just below the date, you may or may not see a small mint mark. If the coin was struck at the Denver Mint, it will bear a D. If there is no mint mark, the coin came from the Philadelphia Mint. No pennies were made at the San Francisco Mint for general circulation in 1977. The reverse side of the coin displays the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Frank Gasparo, the reverse includes the inscriptions United States of America at the top, E Pluribus Unum just above the memorial building, and 1 cent at the bottom. If you look closely at the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, you'll notice a tiny image of the seated statue of Lincoln between the columns, an impressive detail for such a small coin. In terms of composition, the 1977 penny was made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, a standard that had been in place for many years. Each coin weighs 3.11 grams and has a diameter of 19 millimeters. These pennies were produced in very large numbers to meet the nation's demand for coinage. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 4.4 billion coins, and the Denver Mint produced more than 4.2 billion. Because of this high mintage, the 1977 penny is extremely common, and most examples found today have spent decades in circulation. As a result, many show signs of wear, such as fading details, scratches, and discoloration, what collectors call no fine or heavily circulated condition. In this circulated state, the 1977 penny typically holds very little numismatic value. Most worn examples are worth just their face value of 1 cent. However, due to the high copper content, each coin has a melt value that's often around 2 to 3 cents, though it is currently illegal to melt down U.S. 1-cent coins for their metal content. While the coin might not make you rich, it does serve as a reminder of a time when copper was still the primary material in pennies, just a few years before the U.S. Mint switched to the copper-plated zinc composition in 1982. Collectors may still be interested in 1977 pennies if they are in uncirculated condition or if they feature mint errors. Mint state examples, especially those with strong strikes and full red color, can be worth anywhere from $1 to $5 or more, depending on the grade. However, for circulated coins in poor or average condition, the value is generally minimal. That said, there are some error varieties known from 1977, such as off-center strikes, double dies, or clipped planchets. These errors can significantly raise the value of the coin, sometimes ranging from $10 to over $100, depending on the rarity and severity of the mistake. These error coins are prized by collectors and can turn an ordinary penny into a valuable collectible.